Hey, welcome everyone. This is Todd Walters, CEO, Optimus Real Estate Brokers, millionaire agent maker extraordinaire with Craig Parker's Platinum Program. And I just want to thank you for making time to be on today's webinar. This is a very special webinar because I get to do it with a very special person. So just a kind of a quick story on this very special person. Not too awful long ago, a few years back, I was having lunch in a gentleman's office. The guy's name was Pat Flood, and Pat at that time was head of Home Bank Mortgage Corporation. And if you've been in the real estate industry around here for a while, you've heard of Home Bank. And we used to do some business with Home Bank. So I'm having some lunch in Pat's office and just kicking some things around. And he pitches this idea to me. He says, Todd, I've got this idea about bringing somebody on at my company that can help us, not just with the overall environment and culture of our company, but kind of help, tend to the good people at Home Bank that are out there doing good work. Maybe make our people better people, and just I'm gonna call it the chief people person. And he's pitching this idea to me. He goes, I think I've got the perfect man for it. His name is Ike Riker. Do you know him? And I laughed. I chuckled. I said, yeah, I know Ike. I went to his church back when I was a teenager. We used to kind of goof off a little bit at the local gym when I was a kid, and he would come up there and work out, and I was working there. He married my wife and I, and really since that time, growing up, he's always been, in my mind. I picked up the phone and called him a few times, and to get help on different aspects of life and business. So yeah, I know him. So things kind of come full circle. So if you're not familiar with Dr. Dwight Ike Riker, you're getting ready to be. So we have the good privilege at Optimus Real Estate Brokers of having Ike here as part of our team to help all of us not just become better people, but to help other people become better people. So, for example, if you want to grow your real estate business, it helps when you can do a really good job for the clients that come your way and getting them to come back and do business with you and to send people over and over again that they know that are interested in buying or selling a house to you on a consistent and regular basis. I call it creating raving fans. And yes, you can do that by giving exceptional service. But let's face it, as a real estate agent, many times you're busy and you kind of drop the ball on the service side, on time, because you just can't be there all the time for people. But if we can plant a seed in somebody's mind about, hey, look, we are for you, and you having a great experience in buying and selling a house, and somehow pass along some extra value, let's call it an intangible. If we can do that, they're a little more forgiving. It's not an excuse for giving bad service by any means, but it does provide for an overall better experience for the client. So I've asked Ike, to come on today and to help with that a little bit. And it's a great privilege to have him as part of our team here at Optimus Real Estate Brokers. So with that, I'm going to introduce my good friend, Dr. Dwight Ike Riker. Ike, how are you?
I am doing wonderful, Todd, and thank you for allowing me to be a part of the Optimus family. It's exciting to be working with real estate brokers. I get to interact quite a bit with this community. Yesterday, in the area where I live, I was with a young professional group of the realtors in our area, and was with Peter Pasternicki, who's on Flip This House. We were the co-presenters yesterday. So I get to spend a lot of time around the people who represent this area, and to know that I'm getting to spend time with you, with the best of the best, people who realize the value of investing in their own personal development. That's just an absolute thrill, Todd. So I'm really excited to be with you today.
Well, the pleasure's all ours, my man. So you heard my little story about Pat Flood when he pitched that to me, and it was quite interesting. And I watched as that company moved forward and basically brought you on as really the chief people person. And so we were talking not too awful long ago. We had lunch, and I said, man, I would love to do the same thing, something similar to that. Let's see where this goes with our real estate company. And you so graciously said, yeah, let's do it. So that gets us to where we are today. And this really what is our first webinar that we're going to do one every month, as much as we possibly can. And the sky's the limit on this.
Well, I tell you what, I'm ready to jump in if you're ready.
Yeah.
And I am so excited because I love to develop people. I mean, that's the why of my life. And my purpose today, as it will be every time we have a webinar, or whether I'm getting to speak in person to you at the different events that Todd and the team put together, my purpose is always to inspire you. And the word inspire is a very important word. It means to breathe life into something. And so what I want to breathe life into, because those of you who take the time to invest at this level, you know how important personal development is. I never want to waste your time. So every time that you're tuning in or you're coming to a conference and I'm going to be a part of it, my desire is to help you get to the point where you're turning your aspirations into accomplishments. And while you're doing it, not only are you succeeding on the task side of things, but you're also going to succeed equally well when it comes to the relationship side of things. You know, you think about a speedboat going through the water, you can always tell that boat, if you're standing at the back of the boat, you can always tell when it's really clicking the right way because you'll see an equal wake on either side of that boat motor. Well, the same thing is true in business. You know, you have two different sides. You have the task that you're trying to get done, as well as you're trying to build relationships to get things done. And you can always tell when the boat motor is trimmed right just simply by looking at the wake that is left behind that boat. Well, I want to help you to be able to make sure that that wake is equal, that it's looking good, that it's great. And so I'm excited about doing this with you. So let me give you a little bit of background about what I did at Home Bank Mortgage Corporation, because it will help you to understand how I want to be able to help you. And of course, the biggest thing is to be able to help you with your mission and your vision for your organization, as well as your values, by helping you to get even better at creating the culture of your organization. Because we all know that culture is going to eat your mission and vision statement for lunch every day. And culture is just simply the unwritten rules of an organization. If you will, it's the personality of an organization. Just like Todd has this very dynamic personality, what you would find of interest is he was exactly that way as a teenager. He was a guy that was always, you just knew that there was something unique about him. He had a focus, whether that was the bodybuilding side of things that he did with his wife, Christy, one day to become his wife, Christy, or whether it was, you know, launching out and having a franchise of a restaurant at 21 years old. You just always knew that there was a certain thing about him that just really did set him apart. And so I want to help set you apart. I want to help you to be able to develop that culture in your organization, because it really is the personality of the organization. And a very simple way, if you were trying to describe what is culture to your team that you've got in your broker, then the best way to say it is culture is just simply, that's the way we do things around here. And so I was a part of Home Bank. I was their chief people officer, and that meant that I was in charge of all of HR for an organization that had 1,400 people working for it. But the CEO of that organization said, I don't want a typical HR, which is just always, you know, talking about the tactical things and the technical things that take place with the people in the organization. He said, I want our HR area to become the Office of People and Culture, and I want you to help us to develop a culture that is a high-performing culture. And that's exactly what I set out to do with that organization. Our rookie loan officers would do 3 and 4x what a normal rookie loan officer would do, because we built a great training program. So there's a lot of pieces that go together to be able to create that culture. And I was given a very simple task to know if I was succeeding or failing at my job. When I asked the CEO, so tell me what success will look like for me, he said, it's real simple. our organization will be on Fortune magazine's list of the 100 best places to work in America. And so I kind of drew a little bit of a deeper breath and swallowed, and I said, now, let me ask you, are there like 100 small companies, 100 medium-sized companies, 100 large, 100 extra large? And he smiled and said, no. And at that time, there's only 100 companies that can make that list. And then I said to him, I asked him a great question. And the question was this: what really makes a company a great place to work for? Because that's what you want to do in your organization. You want to make it a great place to work for because, number one, it's going to help you to source new talent into the organization. Number two, it's going to help you to retain that talent. And number three, it's going to engage that talent at a vastly different level. And so when I asked the question of the CEO, what really makes a great place to work for, he said, if the people that work there say it's a great place to work, that's what really makes it great. And he said, so what I want you to do is I want you to create the culture that will help us develop a culture that will be a great place to work and will result in the fact that we will be in Fortune magazine. Well, the good news is I kept my job. We did make Fortune magazine. As a matter of fact, we made it 4 years in a row. Every year that we were eligible, we made that list of the best places to work in America, and it opened up the door for me to get to do some interesting things because our scores were so over the top. 92% of the people that worked at Home Bank, and you have to understand, 1,400 people getting a blind survey that doesn't come back to us. It goes to an organization called the Great Places to Work Institute, which is out in San Francisco. So if you wanted to take a shot at the organization, you were able to take this thing anonymously, and people knew that. Imagine giving the people that work for you free access to be able to say whatever they want to say about you, you not being able to filter it. What is that kind of response? What is it going to be like? And we averaged 92% of our people said it was truly a great place to work for. So obviously we were able to source great people. We would average about 1,200 people a month that would apply for jobs after that magazine would come out each year. It gave us the ability to be able to hire the cream of the crop, and that's what we want. We want people with great skills. We want people who are able to be trained well and then put it into practice and get out and develop different areas of their life. And so it became really one of the most exciting periods of time in my life. And then I started actually going and speaking on the behalf of my organization for the Great Places to Work at different places across the country, including San Francisco. So I loved everything that they were able to teach us. So what I want to do is I want to take something that's trademarked with the Great Places to Work. So you're kind of getting a secret right here. You're kind of getting the inside. And you would have to know that an organization would spend at a minimum about $50,000 to even be able to apply to be a part of the Great Places to Work. Now think about that kind of an investment, and you have no idea if you're going to make the list or not because only 100 companies are going to be there. And there's always going to be the Googles that are going to be on that list, the Four Seasons, Nordstrom's, different places like that are going to be on the list. So when I started working on the culture piece, these were the things that I found out that they really measured in the workplace. And you see them on the screen there in front of you. And the first one that I want to talk to you about is credibility. Because if you're going to build a great organization, if you're going to build a great culture, and I'm going to work us into why I believe that a servant leader culture is the best, and then I'm going to share with you an example of a company right here in Atlanta, Georgia, that I've been around most of its existence and have watched it absolutely turn into a juggernaut. I'm going to get to share some of those things with you as we go through this. So here's the credibility is number one. That's meaning that your communications, you see it there, are open and accessible. People want to work for organizations that have credibility, that when you speak the name of that organization out in the community, that people automatically recognize it and know that it is a great organization. And credibility also in coordinating the human and material resources within that organization. And then do you have integrity in carrying out the vision and doing it on a consistent basis? When you have strong credibility in an organization, it's amazing how that impacts your retention of your very best people. And of course, that's who you're wanting to be able to retain, are the people that are really your rainmakers. You know, they're the people who have game. Those are the people you want to keep. Then the second dimension was respect. People want to feel like that you respect them. One of the ways that you do that is by investing in them, supporting their professional development. Because you know, and I know, that people rarely quit companies. They quit managers. That's who they quit, because they feel like, you know, their life is stalled out, or they're never going to increase their sales, or they're never going to be able to accomplish what they want to be able to accomplish. And so being able to help them develop professionally draws respect, and then showing appreciation to them. All of us want to be appreciated. Find ways to celebrate those small victories each and every day, and it's amazing what will happen. The second thing around respect is collaboration with your employees on very relevant decisions. Help them to feel like they're a part of helping to make those decisions that are going on in the organization. Another way to say it is it puts them with skin in the game. They know that if they suggest something, it's not just going to be blown up, but you're going to really listen to them, and you're going to take in what they're having to say. It makes a huge difference right there. And of course, then caring for the employees as individuals. That's one of the big things about servant leaders, I'll show you in a few moments, is that the people that are great servant leaders have this uncanny ability to be able to not just connect with a person in the workplace, but to understand that there's a home place as well that's very important to them. And so you find ways to create respect when you care about that person's family. The hardest thing to measure is the third thing, fairness, because it's such a subjective view, isn't it? I mean, but there are ways that you can create fairness in an organization. You know, equity, balanced treatment for all the terms and rewards. I was with a company on Tuesday of this week. I happen to also pastor a church that's used to a great extent as a conference center. There's a large organization here in the Atlanta area that does their annual meeting. They brought in a great speaker named Jeremy Kubicek. If you've never read Jeremy Kubicek, get his book called 5 Gears. I'm going to be sharing that with you in some of the talks ahead. I promise you, about how do you gear down, and how do you be present where you are. But Jeremy was here to speak, and during that meeting they announced how many people were having extra money put into their direct deposit because of the good year that the organization has been blessed with. Everyone knew the organization had grown well, and when you do that, you're creating people that want to stay there for life. And of course, you know, showing impartiality, absence of favoritism, those kinds of things are just really, really important to people. But fairness, according to the Great Places to Work Institute, is always the area that's the hardest to be able to really score for people. Then, of course, pride. Well, that's, you know, taking pride in your own personal job, understanding how my job fits into the overall organization is so vitally important. And then the type of work that your team is producing. When you know you're really doing great work, when you know you're doing something really worthwhile, it makes a huge impact. And again, celebrate that sense of pride in your organization. If you're going to create, you know, a great place to work, credibility, respect, fairness, pride, boy, what a difference that makes. And of course, that you're standing in the community. When people say, I work for this organization, people just kind of smile and go, man, what a great organization. That's a huge deal. Now, this last one is the one that a lot of people miss out on, unfortunately, and it's called camaraderie. Camaraderie is important because, according to the Gallup organization, if you have a best friend at work, you are 10 times more likely to stay in that job. 10 times more likely if you have a best friend at work. So creating camaraderie, you can't just be popping in and out of an office to create camaraderie. You create camaraderie when people have the ability to be themselves, when you learn how to socially interact with one another, and all of a sudden you begin to really build this sense of being a team and being a family. So credibility, respect, fairness, pride, camaraderie, and let me tell you what it all adds up to. You see the word over to the right of the screen, the word trust? That's why at the Great Places to Work, this is called the Trust Index. They have figured out, and believe me, it is all science. And Todd, I was very disappointed to find out that I could not schmooze my way onto the list, because I thought certainly I could be able to do that. But I found out, no, sir, it's very, very scientific. It's all driven by the demographics that they have. And I was just absolutely thrilled to get to work with them, to be with them, and to help develop trust. And here's why trust is so important to you. Whatever your level of trust is will drive the speed of change in your organization. And in the world today that we're in, we better be fast, we better be flexible, we better be fluid, because if we're not, then we're going to get left behind in the dust. And everybody knows that, that's on this call right now. A lot of people have had to deal with all the TRID rules that came into effect, and things really started changing in your world, in the world of the people who work with you. So understanding that when you have a high level of trust, that's going to determine how fast you can change things in your organization. Then you begin to understand why it's so very, very important. So culture, to me, is absolutely paramount in an organization. Hands down, it eats your mission statement for lunch every day. So then, how do you create this really great culture? Now, you've told me the 5 things that go into it, but is there a system? Is there a philosophy that really works for it? Well, you know, actually there is. And I happen to live here in Atlanta, Georgia, and grew up in downtown Atlanta. And not far from my house, there's a place that is significant in all of the world, and it's the Martin Luther King Jr. Center. And Martin Luther King Jr. said, and I'm going to pop this up for you on the screen so that you can have it. And I went there to the memorial in Washington, D.C., but he said everybody can be great because anybody can serve. You don't have to have a college degree to serve. You don't have to make your subject and verb agree to serve. You only need a heart full of grace and a soul generated by love. And I want you to think about that, a soul generated by love. I am a huge believer that if you love people, that if you see the best in people, that something called the Pygmalion effect really begins to come into force in your life. And when you begin to see people a certain way and your soul is generated by love and not just by profit, let me tell you what begins to happen. You begin to create raving fans. And when you start creating those raving fans, you know exactly what you're going to get from that. You're going to get referrals. You're going to get repeat business. And my goodness, I don't know of any industry that depends on referrals more than your industry. And what a difference it makes when you've got people out being your advocates for you. And if you want to create those raving fans, and I understand, you know, getting the paycheck is important, and every one of us know a commission check is very important, but the greatest satisfaction is when you create that raving fan that goes out and they look at the people they're the closest to, they tell their family members, this is the person you need to go to, this is the person that you need to be working with, and they start sending you those referrals and they start doing the testimonials for you. What a difference that makes, because all of a sudden then you get in that cascade of repeat business, and it's absolutely amazing what can happen. So what I'm trying to say to you today, here's the why of why servant leader philosophy when it comes to doing business. It's because you're establishing a relationship that's based on a lot more than money. And it's going to impact the way that you communicate with people. It's going to impact the overall experience that your client is going to have. And you may have the right systems and you may have the right processes and all of those kinds of things, but I promise you, if you will use servant leadership principles in your day-to-day business, you're going to create fans like crazy. I mean, they are absolutely going to love you. So let me show you some things here real quickly about what happens in that leadership culture. Let me give you 5 truths to help you to be able to understand the different things that will happen. First of all, Peter Drucker said, now I really believe this, he said there's only 3 things that ever occur naturally in an organization: friction, confusion, and poor performance. Isn't that the truth? I mean, if we don't set out, he said anything else must be by design and leadership. So I'm trying to give you a philosophy to go by. I'm trying to give you some wisdom here, because the law of entropy says if things are not getting better, they're going to get worse. So here's what happens when you start developing that servant leadership culture. Here's some of the truths. Number 1, you know that leaders shape the organization's culture more than anything else. So it's going to be a question of, do you buy into this? Because if you do not buy into this, then you're not going to behave into this. And so much of the behavior that you have is what's going to cause other people to really understand what you're trying to do and what you're trying to accomplish there. And listen, if everything's going well right now you don't have this quote, but you ought to write it down. Tom Peters said, leaders must first discover the driving force behind why they like their culture. If your culture is doing really well right now, Tom Peters says you need to discover the driving force behind why you like your culture so that you don't stop doing what works. So if you're doing some things that are working really, really well, you need to dissect that, become forensic with it, and find out why are those things working the way that they're working, because the leader is going to shape the organization's culture more than anything else. But now let me tell you a downside at times when you're the leader in the organization and you've been there a long time. Time in an organization erodes the awareness of the organization. Time in an organization will erode the awareness of the organization. In other words, it's kind of like at your house. Maybe you've got company coming and you've had an old sofa that's there and it looks absolutely horrible, but after a while you and your family just kind of get used to it. But when you've got company coming in, what do? Man, you get that sofa out of there and you make sure that you got the house cleaned up. Well, sometimes in our organizations, our time in it erodes awareness of it. And when you've got new people coming into the organization, fresh eyes are going to see your culture faster than those who've been there the longest at times. So that's why it's important for you to make sure that you're identifying what are the things that are working for us and how can we begin to build an even greater awareness of our culture. There's a lot of ways that you can do that from an HR viewpoint. You can do cultural audits. You can do questionnaires for new employees. You can do a 90-day review of a person. When you do the onboarding process, after 90 days, you could have a set of questions that you could ask the new people in the organization. And of course, just always watch for observations and find ways to be able to surface the culture. Now, here's why it's so important. Thirdly, healthy cultures attract healthy people. And here's some good news for you. Unhealthy people will leave a healthy culture. I'm just telling you. You say, well, how do I know, if I've got an unhealthy culture? Well, one of the biggest things you always look for, and some of you are going to really smile when I say this, but you have drama all the time. You sometimes just have people that are the drama queens. I mean, man, and drama kings. It's male and female. Just life is always a drama. Another way you can tell an unhealthy culture is there's a lack of production. You're just not seeing the production that should be there. You can see it show up when people become very, very self-focused and they're never quite happy. They're just never really happy with where they are, and they're always looking around to see where they can go. And then what produces is what I call sideways energy. That's where you're having a lot of business, but you're not getting anything accomplished. Just sideways energy. The problem with sideways energy is eventually it pulls you down. So here's the fourth thing and truth I'll share with you. The culture of an organization impacts the long-term productivity of an organization. You and I both know that. The culture of that organization, it's going to impact your productivity. And so when you have that unhealthy culture, you have a loss of unfiltered debate. People don't feel like they can talk about things. People get in silos. We all know the terminology. They get territorial. They get turfism. And just basically, it's a lack of collaboration. Let me tell you what healthy cultures do. Healthy cultures talk. They talk. And again, what I said earlier, people don't quit companies. They quit managers. So an unhealthy culture, and here's the truth, they're going to be slow to react when it comes to change, because they're inward focused. And here's the problem with that. When you're inward focused, you have your back to the marketplace. And unhealthy people resist change. I was in a meeting years ago with Stephen Covey, and he started to talk. He said, I want to talk to you about change. And there was kind of a groan in the audience, kind of like, oh, here it goes. And he stops what he's doing, and he just fixes a steely glare on the audience, and he says, oh, if you don't like the word change, you like the word irrelevant better? And of course, there's kind of an inhale, a suction inside of that room. No, we don't want to. We don't want to become irrelevant. So I'm going to give you just some quick things here for you to begin to assess yourself on. Because when we do these other calls and talks, I'm going to go deeper into things. But here's some behaviors, and just rate yourself on a scale of 1 to 10. How do you feel about this? Because a servant leader, they're going to value diverse opinions. They're not going to be afraid of other people having some views and some thoughts. And so a servant leader values everyone's contributions, and they regularly seek out their opinions. And if you're in I must parrot back exactly what my leader said, you're not in a servant-led organization. Number 2, you're going to cultivate that culture of trust that we just talked about. And so you don't have to worry about when people are meeting around the water cooler. They're not going to be there to gossip. They're not going to do pocket vetoes on decisions that are made. They're going to be involved in helping to build that culture. The other thing that a servant leader always does is you develop other leaders. The replication factor is so important. I love Peter Drucker, and Peter Drucker said that there is no success without a successor. So you develop those other people. You teach other people how to lead. You provide opportunities for growth by demonstrating your example. And today, just like you being on this call, you're demonstrating your example of what you're willing to do to take your time that's non-recyclable, and you're staying on this call and you're listening all the way through because you want to become a better leader. So sometimes the leader, as a servant leader, is not always leading, but instead they give up power and they deputize other people to lead. When you have to tell someone exactly what to do, that's doing a task and being a manager. You want to be a leader that empowers other people. And then you help people with life issues. We talked about that a little bit earlier. It's not just the work issues. It's important to offer opportunities for personal development that's beyond the job. And there's a lot of ways that you can do that. Maybe in your organization, you get a Weight Watchers group. You know, everybody's always wanting to lose weight. Or maybe you do a class on debt reduction, and you do something with, someone like a Dave Ramsey. There's just a lot of ways to be able to help people with their life issues, but that's what a servant leader is going to do. That's a behavior. They encourage people. The hallmark of a servant leader is encouragement. And a servant leader says, let's go do it, not you go do it. Everybody's going to go together. You'll understand this one immediately. They sell rather than tell. In other words, it's not something that's coming from a position of power and you're saying, here's what you're going to do. A servant leader is the opposite of a dictator. It's a style, and it's all about persuading and not commanding. And then it thinks you, not me. There's a selflessness quality about a servant leader. If all you're ever thinking about is how does this benefit me, then you'd be disqualified as a servant leader. So very important. Number 8, they think long term. Servant leaders always thinking about the next generation, the next leader, the next opportunity. So what that means then is there's a trade-off between what's important today versus tomorrow, and you make the choices to benefit the future. But the other way you recognize this leader is they will have humility. They act with humility. If you've read Jim Collins of Good to Great and Built to Last, he calls these folks a level 5 leader. And here's what he says about a level 5 leader. He says they have fierce determination, and yet they have great humility. A leader doesn't wear a title as a way to say, I'm in charge. She doesn't think that she's better than everyone else, and they learn to act in a way where they really care for other people. And setting that example is huge. There's an organization here in Atlanta, as I'm beginning to wind up what we're talking about today, and it's called Chick-fil-A. You may not have a Chick-fil-A in your area, but I bet you at some point in the future you will. They've been named the best restaurant chain. They've been named the best chicken sandwich. As a matter of fact, I ingested one earlier this morning. We served them to a group of about 400 or 500 people here at our church today for a conference called Calibrate. And Chick-fil-A has a philosophy, and I'm going to be telling you about this in one of our webinars ahead, but they call it the second mile philosophy. And the whole concept is the first mile is what you simply do because you have to. That gets you to the table. But the second mile is when you develop a mindset that says, I'm going to go beyond what my person that I'm serving, my customer thinks I'm going to do. I'm going to go the second mile. Chick-fil-A is known for raving fans. When a Chick-fil-A franchise is opening up in a city, people camp out in tents all night long so they can be one of the first people to be able to get that chicken sandwich the next day. And so they have popularized this. And here's what I want you to think about as I'm closing this out. I want you to think about who works in a Chick-fil-A restaurant. It's teenagers and senior adults. That's primarily who's working there. But they have found a way, they've found a capability to be able to coach their people, inspire their people, develop their people, mentor their people, and improve their people. And if you are ever in a Chick-fil-A and you ask for something, they will tell you, it's my pleasure. It's my pleasure. That is a servant leader attitude. It came from their founder, Truett Cathy, who is a wonderful friend of mine for over 30 plus years. Mr. Cathy was one of those people who invested in my life as much through his writing and speaking and going in and working with that company in the different ways that I have through the years. It's been remarkable. Now Dan Cathy runs the company, and Dan's actually a member of the church that I pastored for many years. And so I've watched this organization do incredible things. They have grown a minimum of 10% a year. Are you ready? Since 1946. So since 1946, they have continued to grow at a level like that, and their unique culture is their sustaining value. It's the things that make them just absolutely amazing. The franchisee retention rate is 96% and has been for nearly 50 years, and the corporate staff retention is around 97%. An amazing organization. I mean, it truly is. But they recruit for culture. They nurture their talent by telling the truth. And they turn around also and engage their guests in helping them to make their culture better. If you want to read about it, I'll be talking to you more about it, but their HR director, a wonderful friend, is named Deanne Turner, and she wrote a book called It's My Pleasure, The Impact of Extraordinary Talent and Compelling Culture. That's what I'm going to help you build. That's why Todd has me here. That's the why, to be a resource to you, and any way I can help you, you let me know. So my cell phone number, if you need me, is 770-365-9797. 770-365-9797. My email is Ike, I-K-E, .Reigard, R-E-I, GHARDREIGHARD I'm going to look forward to seeing us all go to the top together. God bless. Todd?
Wow, that's like I couldn't take notes fast enough as you were talking there. So it's good stuff. I got a couple of questions if it's okay. And I want, hey, look,
Sure.
if you're watching this webinar right now and you like a lot of the bullet points that Ike laid out there, if you have a question, then you should ask it. Right, you can ask it right now. You can type it in.
Yeah, I love that part.
Right, you can type so if you have a question, you can type it into the control panel. No problem at all. We'll be more than happy to, or you can raise your hand. We can open up your microphone. So, but a couple of quick questions there. I think what you're saying is that for us to create, say, raving fan clients in our business to really do a good job, it primarily starts with us, the employees. So I'm thinking if I'm watching this webinar and I am, say, an administrator, I come in, my job's to jump on the computer and help my real estate team and the agents at the team, put their listings into the MLS, for example. So there's minimum contact with the clients in the sales process, for example. That's a very important job, but if I'm looking at that, like, how does this help me as an individual at the company be relevant, to the company in this big way?
Well, everyone needs to see how they fit into the big picture. This is what you do realize about a servant leader organization. And here's something that a lot of people forget about. They think, well, I'm always interfacing with the client, with the customer. But the truth is, whatever is done in the workplace gets communicated to the marketplace. People can tell organizations that are healthy. People can spot an organization that the people get along inside of that business. And so although the person who's inputting that data, may be sitting there behind a computer doing this and not interfacing as much with the client, they are interfacing with the people that work in that organization. And making sure that you've got a good flow with one another. That's always something that's very important. And, one of my favorite stories is that John Kennedy, when he cast the vision and said that America was going to put a man on the moon, he did that in his inaugural address. By the end of the decade, which America was able to do, he went down and he was touring NASA. And as he was walking through a particular building, there was a man in a white jumpsuit, and he was holding a push broom, and it was quite obvious that's what he was doing for the organization. But President Kennedy, having very high emotional intelligence, walked over to that gentleman, and he said, "So tell me exactly what is your job here?" And the janitor looked at him and said, "To help put a man on the moon." Everybody in the organization should understand how they're putting your version of the man on the moon and how do they connect and how do they interface. Very important that you recognize every aspect of the team. And, depending on the team member, you reward in different ways. Emotionally intelligent people know that. There's some people who like to be rewarded publicly and bragged on. There's other people that just makes them cringe-worthy. I had one person who worked for me at Home Bank, and she didn't like the public praise, and she was a little bit vocal about it, and so it made me realize. So what I would do for her is rather than publicly praising, I would buy tickets to the movies for her because a husband and two sons, her husband was in college, and get them a gift card to go somewhere to eat, and that would thrill her to death. So recognizing and knowing the people that work for you, and the only way you can is you've got to get to know them. And then you are building that team, and you are building that family. So whether you're inputting data or interfacing directly with that customer, or you're in the closing, signing the papers, you know that your work matters.
Okay, I got a couple of questions here, and one of them is most everybody watching the webinar is familiar with you. They know that you're a very famous pastor, and some of the, let me try to put some words into the person's mouth. They might be a little bit nervous in having their faith bleed over into their company. So
Sure.
you've talked to a lot of leaders around the country that do have deep faith. Um,
Right.
I mean, how does this work? Like, is that something that maybe they should keep separate? Like, our government goes out of their way many times to separate faith and business, or faith and government. But I mean, how does this work in business on a day-to-day basis? Is that something you tiptoe around, or is that something you don't hide?
Well, that's an absolutely great question, and you never want to be offensive with what your belief system is. And I think it was St. Augustine that said we should preach everywhere we go, and if necessary, use words. In other words, your behaviors, the way that you treat people, the way that you respect people, the way that you see people, that's the greatest outgrowth of your faith. For me and my background, I did not grow up around church. I did not grow up around Christianity. I didn't experience any of that till I was in my mid-20s. And I was actually a rock and roll disc jockey, believe it or not. And that's when I had the epiphany from a spiritual point of view, but it makes me live my life in a different way because it's a whole lot easier to keep your reputation than it is to regain it. And so I try to make sure that the things that I do align with the belief system that I say that I'm a part of. And unfortunately, in so many cases, that has not been true. So if you are going to be open about your faith, and there are people that are that way, you don't have to be offensive at all. Todd, when I was there at Home Bank, NPR came out, and everyone was a bit nervous about NPR coming out. Because they were worried about, well, what are they going to say about this, whole faith in the workplace thing? And they spent 5 days with me, and they saw how we helped our people. They saw us walk people through situations in their life where terrible things happened, and the company was there because it was a faith-based company. And being a faith-based company doesn't mean that you don't have to be Chick-fil-A. Chick-fil-A is very outward about what they do. Their mission statement actually says, to glorify God. That's what they've decided to do. That's what Truett Cathy wanted to do. It is a privately held company, and so they've got a greater flexibility about that. If you're in an organization that maybe it's not as faith-friendly, I think living your life, and when people come to you to ask you, why did you handle things a certain way, then that's the greatest opportunity in the world to say, because I have a certain set of values that I live by, and usually people want to know, where'd you get your values? And then you can share with them, here's where I picked those up. But for me, it's probably easier for me than it is for a lot of people, even being a pastor, because I did not grow up around anything like this. And so I know how to connect with people and talk with people without making them feel like I've somehow, just overpowering them with the spirituality element of my life. Because, there's 7 basic areas of your life, be it the physical, the mental, the career, and all of that. And spirituality is one of those for me, but it kind of encircles all the others for me. So that's how I try to live it out.
Great advice. One other question, and we'll wrap it up with this one. Good books. What's a great book right now on this topic of, that we're kind of discussing here that you would recommend?
Oh, my goodness, there's so many. I read at least one book a week, Todd. I started that when I was 26 years old, and word got around, and the Atlanta Journal newspaper came out and interviewed me at my office one day and wrote about how many books I read. And the great thing was all of these book publishers then started sending me free books. That was awesome right there. I would tell you one book that I'll tell you a classic, and then I'll tell you one a couple of years old, and then one that's brand new. A classic is The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. It is just amazing. Good to Great, Jim Collins, professor at Stanford University, brilliant advice in Good to Great. Those are 2 classics to me that are just incredible. Then several years ago, a book that really impacted me is called Start with Why. It's written by a man named Simon Sinek, S-I-N-E-K. He's a professor at Columbia University. He's absolutely brilliant. And here's something else I would tell you to avail yourself of. Buy the book, Start With Why, but then go to the TED Talks and put his name, Simon Sinek, in the search engine and watch an 18-minute TED Talk. And if you're not familiar with TED Talks, get familiar with it. Get familiar with social media too. The group I was with yesterday, that was one of the big topics, because the average age of a realtor in America is 58 years old, but the average person you're selling to is 32 years old. I'm on Twitter. Follow me on Twitter, Ike Reichard Twitter. I send out quotes and thoughts, book reviews, all kinds of things on Twitter, so I'd highly advise that. Then the last book I would tell you about is a tremendous book, and it's about the Wright brothers. And it's a brand new book. It's written by a Pulitzer Prize-winning author, and it is absolutely one of the greatest books that I've ever read in my entire life. It is just amazing. And you'll find out about the Wright brothers, how many times they would go out and they would crash. They would take extra parts, but their belief was they wanted to be able to be the first to fly. So the gentleman's name is David McCullough, M-C-C-U-L-L-O-U-G-H. He wrote a book on Harry Truman, and he even made Harry Truman interesting. So I can assure you the Wright brothers book will fascinate you. And Todd, I never knew that the first person who ever died in an airplane crash was flying with Orville Wright, and they crashed in Washington, D.C., and that was the first person ever killed in an air crash. There's things like that in the book that you just walk away going, wow. But I tell you what it'll do, it'll make you dream. Gosh, I love that book.
Yep, I like that. And listen, Ike, I want to thank you for your time today. That was a lot of great information, great webinar. We're going to continue this series and discussions, and looking forward to having you at some of our special live events as well. So we'll let you get back to work. We'll let everybody get back to working in their business and on it as well. So again, Ike, thank you so much, brother.
Thank you, Todd. And hey, I want to congratulate your people, because I could watch the attendees, and virtually everyone stayed on to the very end. That's amazing on a webinar. Way to go.
Thanks, Ike. We'll talk to you soon. Take care.